three empires: Justinian, Charlemagne, and Muhammad. Three empires shaped the early Middle Ages. In the East, the Byzantine Empire carried the heritage of Imperial Rome. In the West, a new dynasty turned the kingdom of the Franks into an empire. And in Arabia, a new religion called Islam became the unifying force of another empire. The history of these empires is woven from the strands of thousands of lives, including an ambitious husband and wife, a family who took over the French throne, and a caravan trader turned prophet. The husband and wife were Justinian and Theodora, emperor and empress of the Byzantines. During the 5th and 6th centuries, while tribes in the western part of the former Roman Empire fought amongst themselves, the rich, city-centered Byzantine Empire endured in the east. But the Eastern emperors had not forgotten that they once ruled the entire Roman Empire, and some of them attempted to reconquer the West. Justinian, who reigned from 527 to 565, was the last to try. Justinian was also the last Latin-speaking emperor in Constantinople. Greek language and social customs were so dominant in the Byzantine world that although the people of the empire still called themselves Romans, to Westerners, they were the Greeks. In a private work called The Secret History, Justinian's official court historian, Procopius, recorded what he really thought of his emperor and patron. Procopius called Justinian a moron and wrote he was never truthful with anyone, but always guileful in what he said and did, yet easily hoodwinked by any who wanted to deceive him. His nature was an unnatural mix of folly and wickedness. Justinian, who surrounded himself with dramatic people, married an intelligent, forceful woman whom some enemies considered a sorceress. Her name was Theodora, and she was very much her husband's partner in running the empire. Early in their reign, when rioters burned much of Constantinople and threatened to topple the couple from their thrones, Theodora refused to flee, declaring that she would rather die an empress than live in exile. She and Justinian managed to calm the riots and keep their thrones. Justinian rebuilt Constantinople on a grand scale. The most monumental structure was a great domed church called Hagia Sophia, meaning Holy Wisdom, which still stands. One of the emperor's favorite ways to impress visiting barbarians was to take them to church at Hagia Sophia. The experience was overwhelming. In his Secret History, Procopius described its great dome as if it floated in the air, as if suspended by a chain from heaven. The church was lined with shimmering mosaics of gems and golds, and a row of windows around the base of the dome made the roof seem to float when seen from inside. Once the emperor had a child suspended from the ceiling to play the part of an angel, filling the dome with heavenly singing. Although the child's thoughts about the episode were not recorded, another of Justinian's achievements had far-reaching, long-lasting effects. By his time, Roman law was a jumble of old practices and imperial decrees. His legal scholars sifted through them, weeding out duplications and inconsistencies. They produced a unified code of laws, a summary of legal principles, and even a book for law students. Much later, in the 12th century, Justinian's collection of laws made its way to Western Europe, where it shaped legal thinking and practice. Much modern commercial law, such as contracts, is rooted in the Roman law that Justinian preserved. Also descended from Roman law were ideas about the relationship between rulers and their people. specifically the idea that emperors have to obey the law just as the people do, and that their power comes from the people. Justinian, however, tended to take law and government into his own hands, concentrating power in the office of the emperor. His subjects had little access to him, and those he did see had to lie on the floor in his presence. When Justinian and Theodora tried to reconquer the western part of the old empire, they met with some success. At first, their general destroyed the kingdom of the Vandals in North Africa and weakened the Ostrogoths, the Gothic people who had taken over Italy, by encouraging the Lombards to destroy their kingdom. In the end, though, Justinian held onto only the island of Sicily, some of southern Italy, and the Italian city of Ravenna, which the Byzantines controlled until the middle of the 8th century. Justinian had other problems too. His campaigns and building projects had emptied the Byzantine treasury, and he faced war on the eastern border of his empire. Justinian's enemy was the Persian Empire, based in what is now Iran. The Persians had threatened Byzantine security for a long time, going so far as to capture and enslave an earlier Byzantine emperor, and then kill and stuff him. Although the Byzantines defeated the Persians in 641, the long and draining series of wars left both empires weak. In Western Europe, meanwhile, the Moravians were also becoming weak. As their power dwindled, others waited in the wings to seize control of their kingdom. A family descended from bishops served the Moravian kings as mayors of the palace. One of them, Charles Martel, was ruler in all but name. He was succeeded by his son, Pepin, who was not content to govern for the Moravians. He wanted to be king in his own right. When the Lombard army threatened Rome, the Pope asked Pepin for help. In reply, Pepin asked to become king. The Pope answered that the man who had the actual power was more deserving of the crown than one who was only a figurehead. Taking this as permission to overthrow the Moravian monarch, Pepin declared himself king in 751, sending the former king off to a monastery. He then defeated the Lombards and gave the Pope a large tract of land around Rome and Ravenna. Pepin's 2 sons inherited his kingdom, but one died young and the other became one of the most important rulers of the Middle Ages, Carolinus Magnus, Latin for Charles the Great, or Charlemagne. Charlemagne's biography, Einhard wrote, Charles was large and strong. His height is well known to have been 7 times the length of his foot. His eyes very large and animated, nose a little long, hair fair, a face laughing and merry. His dynasty is called Carolingian, a term that comes from his name. Charlemagne loved both Christianity and learning. While he ate, he had the books of St. Augustine of Hippo read aloud to him. Einhard described the king's belated efforts to learn to write. He used to keep tablets and blanks in bed under his pillow, that at leisure hours he might accustom his hand to form the letters. However, as he did not begin his efforts in due season, but late in life, they met with ill success. Charlemagne may not have learned to write, but he made certain that his children received an education, daughters as well as sons. He promoted education for others too, starting schools in the cathedrals to educate the clergy, and inviting scholars from northern England and other parts of Europe to live at his court. Charlemagne also took vigorous steps to spread Christianity. He didn't hesitate to use the threat of force. He told the Saxons of northern Germany that if they did not convert, he would put them all to death. They converted. Charlemagne's military campaigns pushed the borders of the Franks' territory north into what is now the Netherlands, east across the Rhine River, and into other areas that even the Romans had not conquered. Then, after 32 years as king of the Franks, he received a letter asking for help. It came from Pope Leo III, whose enemies had removed him from office and cut out his tongue. Charlemagne took an army to Rome and reinstated the Pope. 2 days later, on Christmas Day, 800, the Pope crowned Charlemagne emperor. Although neither the Pope nor Charlemagne had any legal rights over the imperial title in the West, Charlemagne's subjects acknowledged him as emperor. The Carolingian Empire did not have much in common with the Byzantine Empire. The Byzantine emperors' incomes came from taxes on all their subjects, but Charlemagne's came from his own vast private estates. While the Byzantine rulers tended to hide themselves away in their palaces, away from the public, Charlemagne spent much of his time traveling through his empire on horseback, accompanied by his household administrators. But even Charlemagne, with his great energy, could not govern his empire single-handed. He placed border regions where newly conquered people often remained rebellious, under the control of leaders called the marquises, or dukes. In more settled areas, officials called counts handled administrative duties. Drawn from the Frankish upper class, these marquises, dukes, and counts were the beginning of the new European nobility. At the other end of the Carolingian social scale were the agricultural peasants. Some were lifelong laborers on the old Roman estates. Others were nomadic tribespeople who had settled down to work the land for a living. Estate records from Charlemagne's time, which list the names and status of the peasants, reveal a mix of Roman and Germanic backgrounds. One family had both biblical and Frankish names. A man named Abrahil was married to a woman named Berthildus, and their children were Abram, a biblical name, Avramarius, and Bertrada. The family's status was also mixed. Abrahil was a slave, which meant that he had to work for the owner of the estate and could not leave it. Berthildus was free, which meant that she owed labor on the estate in exchange for the use of the owner's land. But she could leave if she wanted to. Peasants seldom moved. However, like Berthildus, they were married to slaves. Estates belonged to abbots, bishops, popes, nobles, kings, and emperors. On an estate, the best agricultural land was set aside for the owner's use. The rest was divided among the peasants, who grew crops and raised livestock to feed their family. They paid the owner for the use of the land in labor, goods, or rent money. Abrahil shared his farm with 2 other men. All were tenants of the Lord who owned the land. In return for the use of the land, they carted the Lord's goods to market, carried his firewood in the winter, mended his fences, plowed his fields, harvested his crops, and paid the Lord 4 pennies a year in tax. For Abrahil's family, a typical spring day was hard work from dawn to dusk. Berthildus rose early to light the fire in the family's hut and heat the morning meal of cooked grain. Abrahil took his ox to the Lord's fields, where, overseen by the Lord's stewards or managers, he and the other men of the village did the plowing. Young Abram helped his father by prodding the ox. 8-year-old Avramarius fetched water from the well and then took the cow to pasture. In the hut, Berthildus placed the baby Bertrada in a cradle near the warm fire and then heated water for brewing beer. Returning tired in the evening, Abrahil, Abram, and Avramarius ate bread and peas boiled with ham and drank beer before falling asleep on straw pallets, covered by rough linen sheets and woolen blankets woven by Berthildus. The next day, And the day after that would be much the same. Other than the different tasks that came from changing seasons, peasants' lives held little variety except for a feast days, religious holidays scattered through the year. A visit from an official might break the monotony. Charlemagne himself might pass by with his group of attendants, including an elephant that had been a gift from far off Persia. If Aberhale and Berthilidus witnessed such an event, they would talk about it for years. After Charlemagne died in 814, his empire fell into disorder. His son Louis inherited the empire. Who inherited the empire was neither a good statesman nor a skilled military leader. Louis divided the empire among his 3 sons and gave them some responsibility for ruling. But they had no sooner claimed their lands and titles than they started fighting among themselves, just like the Frankish princes of old. In 843, 3 years after Louis's death, the 3 signed the Treaty of Verdun, dividing Charlemagne's empire into 3 parts: France, Germany, and the Middle Kingdom, which ran from northern Italy to the Netherlands. The Middle Kingdom was destined to be a source of conflict. For centuries, France and Germany would claim parts of it as their own. Some historians even claim that World War I and II in the 20th century were the direct result of the Treaty of Verdun. Compared with his ineffective descendants, Charlemagne was remembered as an extraordinary leader. Not all of his campaigns, however, had ended in victory. In the 1770s, he had hoped to conquer Spain, but his plan was halted by another force, a force set in motion years earlier by the visions of an Arabian prophet. Muhammad and the New Faith. Arabia was never part of the Roman Empire, but its merchants traveled with the Byzantines as well as the Persians. Arabs lived in family and tribal units. They worshipped many gods. The city of Mecca was a religious center because it had a shrine called a Kaaba, which housed symbols of the Arabs' gods. In this city, a man named Muhammad was born around 571. Working as a caravan trader for a wealthy woman who later became his wife, Muhammad met Jews and Christians in towns on the edge of Byzantine territory. In his late 30s, he received a mystical revelations that he attributed to God. He began preaching a new faith. Like the Jewish and Christian religions, it was based on the worship of a single God. At first, Muhammad converted only his wife and a few relatives, but the merchants of Mecca became worried, fearing that he was discrediting the Kaaba. To escape the merchants' wrath, Muhammad fled to a city later known as Medina, where he preached and gathered followers. Their notes on his sermons formed the basis for the Quran, the holy book of Islam, the religion Muhammad founded. In 630, Muhammad and his followers returned in triumph to Mecca. He spent his final 2 years unifying the Arabs under Islam, creating a state in which he was both religious and political leader. Muhammad regarded himself as the last in a series of prophets that included Moses and Jesus. He told his followers to submit to the will of Allah, the single Almighty God. The basic tenet of Islam was there is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his prophet. Those who follow Islam were assured salvation. After Muhammad's death, a series of his followers ruled the state he had founded. These Khalifa, or caliphs, from the Arabic word for successor, guided the rapid spread of Islam. In the first wave of conquest, from 632 to 655, Arab armies conquered Syria, Egypt, and the Persian Empire. The conquered populations found Islam attractive, and many Christians, Jews, and Persians converted. The Arabs proved remarkably adaptable to the new circumstances. Upon reaching the Mediterranean Sea, for example, they became excellent sailors, crossing the sea to conquer Sicily and other Byzantine territories. They borrowed from and sometimes improved on the art, architecture, and intellectual achievements of those they conquered. After taking Baghdad, the city of the Persian Empire, which included Iran and Iraq, the Arabs mastered the Persians' knowledge of astronomy. They also discovered the works of the ancient Greek philosophers and medical experts in manuscripts that had reached Persia by a curious path. Long before, when Christianity became the dominant religion in the Roman Empire, intellectuals true to the old gods left the Christian world and settled in Persia, taking their books with them. By the time of the Islamic conquest, these works had been translated into Persian. Arab scholars translated them into Arabic, adding their own commentaries. Muhammad's faith still spread widely after his death. Arab armies stripped territory from the Byzantine Empire, leaving it with only Constantinople, the Balkan Peninsula, and a portion of Asia Minor or Turkey. Even in the shrunken form, the Byzantine Empire was a wealthy and powerful force in the Eastern Mediterranean. Constantinople, with 1 million inhabitants, was one of the great early medieval cities. Other Byzantine cities produced silks, glass, tapestries, ivory carvings, and fine jewelry that were much prized in the West. The Arabs also moved into North Africa, where they destroyed the remnants of Byzantine rule. They crossed the Mediterranean into Spain and overthrew the Visigoths. The Moors, a term used by European Christians for the Muslims who had come to Spain by way of Morocco in North Africa, might have gone to conquer all Europe, but after they crossed the Pyrenees Mountains into western France, they ran into an army commanded by Charlemagne's grandfather, Charles Martel, the mighty mayor of the Merovingian palace, who earned his nickname Hammer of Christendom for turning back to the Islamic invaders in 732. Spain, however, remained under Arab control for centuries. It was one of the many caliphate subdivisions ruled by a caliph that formed when the Arab Empire split along political and religious lines. The main religious split, which endures today, was between the Sunnis and the Shiites. The Shiites were followers of Muhammad's son-in-law, Ali, and argued that only his descendants could rule. The Sunnis accepted another line of caliphates, but also accepted the Sunnis' traditions not included in the Quran. Yet, despite political and religious divisions, the Arabic language and a shared intellectual and social heritage united the Islamic world of the Byzantine, Frankish, and Muslim empires. The Muslim one had the greatest scholarship. Muslim scholars studied Greek philosophy and science from the West, and Indian mathematics and Persian astronomy from the East. In the 8th century, they introduced the Indian idea of 0 and 9 digits to the West, so that the system came to be known as Arabic numerals. Though it would take the Europeans another half century to adopt the system and write, for example, 1276 instead of Roman numerals. Throughout the Middle Ages, Muslim scholars not only preserved the learning of the ancient world, they added to it. They improved the astrolabe, a tool the Greeks had invented to navigate, and expanded on Greek medical knowledge. In Islamic cities in Spain, Sicily, and southern Italy, Jews translated Islamic texts from Arabic into their own Hebrew language. Later, Christian scholars translated the Hebrew text into Latin, bringing a wealth of knowledge to Christian Europe.